Good morning, everybody. So I hope you can all see me. Thank you once again for joining us for today's webinar. So I'll just get straight into the point and start off with the housewarming. So first of all, my name is Leonida Combo. I am the communication and content manager at Ajua. And today we'll be taking you through some very interesting findings that we had recently uncovered on a report that we had partnered with Carepay to do. So please do feel free throughout this webinar to record all your questions in the comment section throughout the webinar. So we intend to start off with our welcome and our introductions, and then go straight into the presentation and do a Q&A section at the end. And maybe first of all, I could start off by introducing the different companies that will be involved. So we have Ajua, and Ajua is Africa's first integrated customer experience company for businesses on the continent, for those of us who are new to Ajua on the call. So Ajua exists to bridge the gap between businesses and their customers through our technology that points to the areas that matter most to customers so that we can measure and optimize their customer experience. So next, I'd also like to introduce our partners, Carepay. So Carepay is actually the company behind Ntiba, and that is the preferred health financing technology platform that is being used right now by the Kenyan government, retail, as well as private health sectors. It's also been a proven, payments integrator. They have revolutionized the management of large-scale health schemes, and they've been supporting the drive for universal health coverage in Africa. So actually, Farm Access and Safaricom were both the founding partners of Carepay. And next, I'd actually like to ask Anne Joroge. She's the account manager at Levanta, to briefly introduce the report and tell us more about what the report is. Anne?
Thank you, Leonida. As mentioned, my name is Anne. And just to give a high overview about the report, the Mobile Transformation Health Report, which was conducted by Carepay and Ajua. So the report summarizes the consumer habits during the COVID pandemic. And it has come up with we came up with 5 topics that we noticed through the survey. And the topics are around just a snip overview about some of the findings on the mobile access and how it's driving access to healthcare among the public, and also how providers and payers are digitizing their processes to match the growing consumer need. So I think we'll be going through the details during the session.
Thank you so much, Anne, for that wonderful introduction. So at least now we all have context on what today's webinar is all about. So without further ado, I'd just like to also introduce our speakers for today, beginning with Dr. Toroti Mwirigi. He's the commercial director at Carepay, and he's passionate about how innovation is transforming healthcare in Africa and also across the world. He's currently the commercial director at Carepay Kenya, where, as I mentioned earlier, where he leads growth of the Ntiba platform and their users, manages their users and partners. He has an educational background in information systems, medicine, and is also an MBA holder from the Strathmore Business School. And Dr. Mwirigi has over 15 years of experience gained from previous roles in health insurance, health technology startups, and health not-for-profit organizations. So the immense experience that he's attained has broadened his understanding on the importance of improving quality of healthcare and the need to work with strategic partners to achieve this as well. And last but not least, I'll also be introducing Kamande Wambui. He is the head of data science at Ajua. He's been leading the data science team through a platform that empowers integrated customer experience in Africa. And in this role, he's provided data support for current products and develops new data products to develop consumer understanding through advanced analytics and machine learning. So these products have leveraged on integration of structured but high velocity mobile phone engagement data from consumers, second and third party consumer data. Kamande previously worked at Nielsen as a data science associate for East Africa, and he supported the commercial team to deliver quality retail data to clients and delivered technical consultancy also on data science related audit queries, through FMCG categories. He's also a part of the global emerging leaders at Nielsen. He currently holds a master's degree in statistics and master's degree in computational intelligence from Nairobi. He's also published multiple papers on the understanding of consumption and viewing habits of the Kenyan consumers. So maybe now we can go straight into our topic for the day, which is digital transformation in Kenya healthcare. Maybe just to start off, and I'd actually also like both of my speakers for today to chime in on this. Mobile penetration in Kenya, as we all know, is reaching its pinnacle. According to a report recently done by Deloitte, the Global Mobile Consumer Survey, they found that up to 97% of the respondents on this particular study reported that they had access to a cell phone, which is compared to 49% in 2015. So as you can see, there's a really huge growth there. And according to the report that we recently published with Carepay, it says that at the moment, over 37% of Kenya's consumers are currently using mobile platforms to access healthcare. However, over 90% of Kenyan consumers are actually interested in receiving more healthcare services through their phones. Dr. Toruti, maybe you'd want to take us through this and explain for us the need for mobile services in healthcare.
Thanks, Leonida. And thanks for this opportunity to talk about this report and the emerging changes that are occurring due to mobile phones. I just wanted to give a background based on your mention of Deloitte about the cell phone availability and to people and how many people have mobile phones. I think what we have seen in Kenya and in emerging markets is the fact that the mobile phone has become the key channel for user experience. And the mobile phone has been able to transform industries from financial services, dating, transportation, like you have digital taxis, and healthcare and health insurance has pretty much lagged behind. But what we found from this study is that as a result of COVID, healthcare has become a top priority for families, and now we wanted to understand a bit better about what in healthcare. If you have these mobile phones, why aren't you utilizing these mobile phones for healthcare? And what we are learning is the gaps that are there. As you had mentioned, quite a number would want to receive healthcare through the technology they have at their hands. But again, quite a number have not been approached, or we are not, as digital health providers, are not meeting the needs. And I think Kamande will talk about that user experience. But from the survey, I think assumptions have always been telehealth is the key thing people are looking for. It's logical. If I have a mobile phone, I would theoretically be able to connect to a doctor easily. But from what we have seen, it's very simple things like information, general information. People want a localized general information. So localized being I am in Kenya, I'm in a part of an area. And COVID really brought this up. How do I get more information about COVID within my location, my country? Because it's a global phenomenon. And what we need to dig further is just understand what information this is. So general information was stopped because of COVID. Also, people were now more cognizant about the issue of payment for healthcare. So NHIF became a top issue that they want more information about. And I think this is another area of digging deeper to understand what about this about NHIF they really want to know. And I would presume is my benefits, how much it costs, where can I seek services, which is the hospitals on the panel, etc., etc. So what we are seeing is technology like mobile phones beginning to have impact in healthcare. And what we really need to know is what is it that the client, these consumers want, so that we give them what they want. And let us not make assumptions like what I've seen before, like telemedicine being the big driver. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mwirigi, for that comprehensive comment. Maybe Kamande, do you have anything to add, especially considering the fact that we've mentioned just now, Kenya actually ranks among the leading global adapters of smartphone use, and the rise of these smartphones continues to accelerate, especially in the Kenyan market. Dr. Toroti also mentioned a very interesting point about how it's putting a lot of pressure on businesses to transform their service delivery on a mobile-first experience. Maybe Kamande, you'd like to comment on this as well.
Yeah, thanks, Nida, and thanks for this opportunity. So a couple of things that came out from this survey, some of which we had already done as Ajua in the course of building our products to help organizations in healthcare with their customer experience, including some of the people on this webinar, like Gertrude and so on and so forth. So 54% of Kenyans access some form of mobile healthcare. That's what we found out. But then we're interested in figuring out, like Dr. Toroti mentioned, what is the driver of the other 46%? And the top of that was that healthcare facilities have not equipped them to be able to do that. And so the question comes back, okay, why is that not happening? Since the adoption of mobile phones is actually that high. Then we also wanted to find out, in order to help these health facilities understand why it is important for them to do that. The people we talked to said that the most important thing about them accessing mobile healthcare was that it helps them feel that they're in control, and they feel that they're empowered to make their own decisions. Okay, then we can take that apart and say, okay, what does that look like? One is not just around them getting their personal information or information about different things around their healthcare. It's also equipping them with the ability to provide feedback to these health facilities, and we've seen this as a key component of ensuring that health facilities are building up in terms of not just their footfall but also their revenues. The moment we equip customers not just with the different access points of access to healthcare information, but also with the ability to provide feedback, and that feedback is then acted upon by the health facilities. We've seen tremendous impacts on that. I think it goes without mentioning that across all the industries, healthcare included, there's a huge correlation between customer experience, based on what you provide to your customers, and revenue. And we've seen this based on the data that we've also built, outside of this report. Now, does that mean that CX is sufficient? No, it's very important, but not sufficient. It still means that despite you providing superior customer experience, there are the boxes that you have to tick. But customer experience is definitely important to the stack of things that you leverage on using mobile as a healthcare facility.
You've actually raised some very great, profound points, especially on how. Sorry, we'll have to mute Mariam. Sorry about that, everybody. So I was saying earlier, Kamande, you actually brought about some really great insights on, how healthcare providers can actually improve on access to healthcare via mobile, and how these healthcare providers can also create more value through, implementing digital business models. And you're actually going into, the next area of our conversation, really, which is, addressing who is your real competition, really, and how do you exactly, get more revenue growth. So actually, according to the report, one of the major insights that we had seen, and Dr. Toroti also mentioned this earlier in the conversation, which is how Kenyans have placed a larger emphasis on healthcare since the onset of the pandemic. However, what we're actually seeing on the ground is that healthcare providers are still not really seeing this impact on their revenues. And so I think the main question to maybe both of you would be, what could be the reason behind this?
I think I can go first. Sorry, go ahead, Troy.
Yeah, go ahead, Kamande. Go ahead.
Right, great. So one of the things that we've also run in parallel with this study is an update on Ajua's monthly consumer wallet data to try and understand, okay, how much are Kenyans on average spending each particular month across all the different categories, and what proportion of that is going to the different categories. So if you look at data from the last 3 years, based on daily data collection, we see that there was a decline in 2020 from an average of 8% in 2019 and 2018 down to 6%. Much as this might not be too significant, directionally it points to a decline in the amount of money that people are spending on medical care. And this resonates with what hospitals or healthcare facilities are seeing. And there are a lot of hypotheses out there about why there was a decline. Was it because of people allocating, as much as people are putting more importance on healthcare, were there more important things? Was it because of fear around visiting hospitals? I don't know what the answer is, but that decline was obviously something that we saw, and health facilities are also feeling the impact. I don't know, Toroti, if you want to add on something to that.
Dr. Mwirigi, can you hear us?
Yeah, sorry about that. Just on the point about the increasing awareness of healthcare, and it not necessarily relating to visits. It's based on several things. One, remember, people could be seeking for health information but are not necessarily sick. So it is a possibility that the fact that there's a lot of activity on the digital space would not necessarily translate to a visit. Second is, during the COVID period, I think there was a general decline in hospital visits all over. And that was as a result of people's behavior, fearing the unknown about COVID and the provider's response to that. And then the third would be just trends. So healthcare, there are healthcare trends on visits, and the providers in this call know this, and they have their trends, and they know when to allocate more resources based on history, and they have done this for years. So those could be the reasons why the activities on the digital space did not necessarily translate to visits. I would also mention there's a mismatch, and there's a point. We as MTIBA also collecting customer sentiments and sharing it with providers, because we believe they are the ones who ultimately will dictate what kind of services they want. And the first mismatch, in my view, and again, I stand to be corrected, was this element that, considering that if there was this pandemic, telemedicine would have skyrocketed because theoretically it makes sense, but you don't necessarily go to the behavior of the people. So what I would say is, providers on one side, and the clients, as well as even people designing products for health products for consumers, need to actually engage the consumers more. So and we have a lot to learn, especially in healthcare, because healthcare has been primarily a brick and mortar kind of business and very traditional. Also on the flip side, insurance, and this kind of digitization of the whole experience, and getting sentiments from clients, like what we do at Mtiba, also helps people now design services and products that match the customer. So I would put it that way.
Very great point, Toroti. I think one of the other misconceptions or even hypotheses that was rejected based on this study was on the most important considerations that customers make whenever they are making a choice to visit a healthcare facility. There are so many things that the team had in mind around different hypotheses, including knowing the doctors personally or previous experiences with individuals there. But it turns out that the most important things are actually, one, proximity to the health facility, obviously. But secondly, from a CX point of view, it's the speed and efficiency of services. Those are two main considerations that customers are making whenever they are making a choice on which health facility to go to. And the second one really speaks to customer experience, because that means that customers are really paying attention, or patients are really paying attention to the speed at which they're served. And this is not something that is only confined to healthcare. We see this across all the different industries, that the number one driver of customer experience. So customer experience is obviously core, and the number one driver for any organization that wants to transform its customer experience and then grow revenue is the speed of service. And that seems quite intuitive. But I from our observations, we noticed that organizations are putting a lot of emphasis elsewhere, as opposed to focusing on the number one thing that customers are saying really matters to them. That's why listening to customers and understanding what their pain points are through every single touch point as they interact with you becomes very important. But not just that, acting on that information.
Thank you so much. Those were actually very great insights as well on the general mismatch around the uptake of maybe telehealth services, as well as maybe decline of visits in hospitals generally. This actually just brings out that the point that it's actually very crucial to understand your consumer wallet and really, pick out who your real competition is. And this is a conversation that we've been having internally at Ajua for a very long time, in terms of how do you know where your customers, your consumers' money is actually going. You may think that the competition that you have is directly within your industry, but it could be, other external factors that you've not really considered. And, earlier, Kamande, you also mentioned a direct correlation between having a great, customer experience program and, how this can actually contribute to increasing your customer lifetime value. So maybe could you just give a better comment, just more insights on the same, and explain why customer experience is important?
Yeah. So globally, there's been multiple studies, especially with the advent of very academic metrics of measuring customer experience, top of them being the Net Promoter Score, that has been used to estimate and measure loyalty and satisfaction to quite precise levels. And so over the last 4 years, we've been working with our customers, including Carepay, who are our partners, to try and layer these customer experience metrics on top of revenue data. That means that you just don't collect this information around your customers at the end of the month or at the end of the quarter. It's continuous conversations at every single touch point with these customers, from when they get into triage to when they pay and when they exit. Even their relationship and the interaction with the guard, that matters as well in terms of customer experience. And so building all these data points has helped us to contextualize what these metrics mean in terms of revenue growth. And revenue growth is obviously driven by me being loyal to you, in terms of you as a brand, you as a healthcare facility, you as an organization. And that loyalty then leads to me being able to be your number one advocate out there. We call that promotion. So
Great invasion, followed by.
Sorry, Kamande, you are on mute.
Sorry. So that means that that globally that relationship would be at 74%. But when we put all the data over the last 4 years across different industries, we see something close to that, about 60% correlation between the net promoter score and revenue growth. And this is the first of its kind in this part of the world, especially because customer experience is, I'd say it's still very in the very younger days. But moving forward, like Dorothy said, understanding the customer and doing so using digital tools and providing digital access to information, which is the most important thing, and that information is two-way, will become the most imperative thing. Yeah, I think that's the most important point there.
Thank you, Kamande. Very comprehensive answer. The other thing I actually was curious about, you mentioned a lot about consumer wallet earlier, and perhaps many people on this call are also just interested in hearing, what were some of the main spending priorities during the COVID-19 pandemic, during the onset of the pandemic in Kenya. Do you have any insights on those?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, one of the things we obviously noticed in relation to healthcare was that there was a decline, and Dorothy explained why. That has been as a player within the industry, a decline of 8% to 6% in 2020. And we saw some other coping mechanisms. One, of course, was that the overall wallet size, there was a slight decline in at the onset of the pandemic, and with the average spending per month going from about 18,000 ish to about 16,000. But then that started coming up later in the year. Now, in terms of the coping mechanisms that consumers deployed in order to deal with the different challenges within the year, of course, we saw declines in certain categories, such as alcoholic drinks, for instance. That went from about 3% to 1% at some point within the year. But then alcohol, seems to be quite resilient, and it's back up on the rise. Of course, categories such as betting went down, sorry, and only started to pick up later in the year. Food was what remained quite resilient, of course. So we see a contribution of about 25% in terms of the wallet share, and that remained more or less around the same figure within the year, meaning that consumers are focusing on what's most important. But then we saw different changes within the year, allocations and coping mechanisms play out where the less crucial categories took a hit expectedly. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sam, for that brilliant comment. I also wanted to now move into, the realm of mapping out your changing customer expectations. And, Dr. Hello?
I just wanted to comment on the issue of competition and
Oh, yeah, sure.
This issue around the spending habits or the spending behaviors around. I'll just go particularly to healthcare, and from our experience, and also from this study, and many studies that have been done, when we are trying to digitize value chains like in healthcare, what we have seen that the financial systems have seen that is out of pocket payments are a significant contributor to household expenditures on healthcare. So what that means is that when I am sick, I go to a hospital, I have to use cash, either my own cash, I borrow it, or someone remits to me. And that was not a real surprise from the study, because that has been a common study finding globally, even in our own internal MTBS studies. But of course, the problem with out-of-pocket payments is it's a huge barrier to healthcare access. One reason is, if I don't have the money, I will not seek healthcare, and I will only seek healthcare when now it is a dire emergency. And the problem with that is that I might not get the proper quality, so I might not necessarily go to a good quality health facility. And number two, the cost of treatment becomes quite expensive, and because it's an emergency. So it becomes a vicious cycle, and healthcare emergencies have been known to push people into poverty. It's actually one of the global leading reasons why people are pushed into poverty. But what was interesting from this report was that we are seeing the emergence of mobile wallets within the insurance space. And this was actually from the Ajua data set, closely following on the card-based systems that are currently there for the private insurance market. So what this tells us is that, as Kamande had mentioned before, the reasons why mobile is gaining traction is like any other industry. People have control. People are able to know more information in their hands without necessarily referring to a third party or a call center, so that they get more in control. And the element of, look, if I have this mobile wallet, for example, like an MTBA mobile wallet, and it says that these are the verified providers in the panel, the sense of security comes in, that someone is actually vetting and ensuring that my treatment is going on well. So these are the things we are beginning to pick out, and the study was just fortifying these findings, that people want control, and they want to be in the control of it. And healthcare has reached that point where the patient needs to feel like they're in control. Last point is that traditionally healthcare has always been provider driven, but like any other industry, healthcare will move, in my view, and this is my personal opinion, will move to almost a consumer-like industry, where it is driven by the consumer rather than the service provider.
That's very good insight as far as, providing access to all these, healthcare services via mobile, and how that is changing in Africa. And we're actually going to delve a little bit more into that shortly. Just after, we address, the previous points that both yourself and Kamande had brought out on, spending priorities and why it's crucial to keep on mapping this out. Essentially, the pattern here really just says that you need to keep mapping out your changing customer expectations. And one of the comments I think I saw that you had made in the report, Toruti, was also about, customer data. How a lot of healthcare providers already have this information on their consumers. And, you were also speaking about how this data also be used to improve the customer experience. How can it be used to, actually improve the overall customer journey Could you perhaps also just give us a comment on that?
Yes, I think I would also add health insurance company. I think a majority of them have digitized as early as banks were digitizing. So the data is there. I'll talk about two things that the healthcare service providers need to look at. Is one, there's a user experience, which is key, but in healthcare, there's a second level, which is healthcare outcome. You want your patient healthy. The insurance or the person who is insuring you wants the patient healthy. Unfortunately, our model for health service at the hospital side is more driven by illness. And what needs to happen is moving away from necessarily looking at illness, but your health, healthcare outcomes of your patient, a healthier consumer. And how can all these organizations be able to leverage on all this data? I believe it is just looking inward and reflecting and changing their processes towards now the customer, the patient, and I would say these are more established, more older organizations, and perhaps the change needs to happen gradually, but that they need to move to an organization mindset where you look at the customer first, or in this case, the patient, and then know that the value of their data and inward-looking kind of activity, and with the assistance of people like yourselves and ourselves who are digitizing the space and using the techniques that we are using to be able to collect client sentiment, would be able to work with these service providers to be able to reflect inward and start giving what the customer wants. So it's essentially an inward reflection. They have the data, they have the knowledge beyond even what us as technology companies have. It's just they need to pivot and start looking more inward.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah, if I can add something on that. I'm trying to mention something quite interesting that we always talk about, which is it's becoming more and more the case that an organization is no longer what it says it is, rather it's what consumers say it is. And healthcare might be late to the party, but it's definitely getting there. So the follow-up thought around that is, if you do not have the ability, or you do not grow in terms of your data capabilities over time, then you will definitely be on the losing side as this transformation happens, especially in private healthcare. And what's the process for you to getting there? I'd thinking about it and working with organizations across different sectors. If you look at the journey of getting to that point of 360 understanding of who your customer is, the first step, or the precursor, is I wouldn't say it's a first step. It's like step 0 is doing some form of customer journey mapping. And healthcare seems to definitely have frogged that. I think by design, in terms of what it takes for you to be a healthcare facility, the first thing you have to do is understand what the customer journey looks like. That's something that a lot of other industries have to spend a lot of time and resources figuring out, and they're different journeys. But healthcare facilities are lacking in that sense, in my opinion. But then the next step to that is now, start to bring all these data pieces together. So if you have insurance data, if you have a form of a CRM or data platform where you track your customers, do you bring that in? If you have if you have other collaborations with or partnerships with other players such as ourselves and MTIBA, what kind of data do you get from that? And that means that now you start putting in the bringing together the necessary data pieces together to understand the customer, so that by the time the industry is fully consumer driven or customer driven, then it does not get you on a flat foot. You're already ahead of them. You're able to develop profiles, and you're able to address their issues and anticipate them proactively. Now, there's a caveat to that, obviously, and not doctor, let's call him doctor, he speaks like a doctor. Walubengo is here. Walubengo is the DPO at Ajua, and he's been a crucial part of building the Kenya Data Privacy and Protection Law. He'll tell you that healthcare data is obviously the most sensitive data around. So you must be very careful around who you bring in to access that data and what you use the information for, especially even around the talent and the people who help manage that around transparency, access, and all the different pillars of data protection.
Thank you so much for speaking about customer journey mapping and why it's very crucial to building your customer experience. And Dr. Toruti, how you mentioned that there has to be a change as far as the organizational mindset is changing from that provider mindset, and now looking at them differently and saying, okay, now we have to look at them more in a, as consumers and figure out how do we make the experience a lot better. And maybe just to go back to the point that you had mentioned earlier but actually before I go to that next point, I'd just like to remind our audience to send their comments, any questions that you may have from the webinar in the chat. So we'll be reading any of the questions that you put there after this session. So you can find the chat. If you go to the panel at the bottom, there's the 3 dots there, more, and then you should be able to find chat. So just write your question and we'll be able to read it at the end of this session. So now back to the actual webinar. So we were talking about, accessibility, increasing accessibility of, these healthcare services, one of them mainly being insurance. So it's very interesting. There's an insight that we also got within the report where we were noting that 60% of respondents said that they have some form of health insurance, and actually majority of them, as you mentioned earlier, Dr. Toruti, are using a mobile phone wallet, and 47% of these respondents actually preferred using MTBA. Maybe if you could just close on this webinar just by giving us more insights as far as how mobile is transforming, the insurance industry in Kenya, and how this experience can be scaled up throughout Kenya's health sector as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so sorry about that. Yeah, I was as I mentioned earlier, there were some interesting outcomes from this study, and the one you have mentioned, 60% have some form of insurance. And when we looked at the demographics, we realized these were people within urban areas. So again, this was quite insightful. And I think just to correct you, the card-based utilization of insurance was still the majority, slight majority. But what was the interesting part was that the mobile wallets like MTBA to replace cards was emerging and was becoming almost a popular way of people managing their benefits. So that was interesting. And what we have seen is for us to be able to achieve universal healthcare, and that was part of this study. We are trying to understand the consumer and seeing the effects of digitization. How does this give feedback to people making decisions around universal healthcare? One thing is we have seen is key is that paper-based processes where you fill in a paper claim form or you have to place a physical card somewhere are also looking like an extra cost to the whole healthcare value chain, and also inefficiencies. And as Kamande had mentioned, all these hospitals and insurers have this data, some a lot in paper form, partially in digital form. And for them to be able to start understanding their customers and also understanding healthcare outcomes, digitization needs to happen. And the other, look, like I'll give a good example, though I'm not a better betting person. Betting is like fully digital, and there's no necessary, the experience is a fully digital experience, and people can immerse themselves into that experience quite easily from their phones. And in healthcare, we have it a bit broken, because some is paper, some is digital. And the result of this is inefficiency. We don't know what we don't know. And that's another reason why sometimes you wonder, why is it that these industries like insurance and healthcare providers are not responding to clients? It's not that they don't have the expertise, it's just because there's an inefficient overlying activity. And then of course there's other issues like getting people to get this insurance. There's a cost there. There's the traditional middleman who has been critical in the customer experience for the insurance, but it's an unnecessary cost. And can you provide the same access through the mobile directly to our insurance product while giving the same customer experience that a broker would give? That is another area that is key, because the broker client or agent client relationship is very important. And I can give examples like in Antiba, what we've been able to demonstrate in the early days of digitizing health insurance activities and claims is there is savings between 10 and 20%. Now, if you're able to now fully digitize the whole value chain, what efficiencies can you gain from that? And then you layer on the issue of data. You begin to understand what is happening, and then that leads to decisions around resource allocation. For example, if you have data showing that in real time that malaria we are having an epidemic of malaria in a particular area, that kind of resources allocated. So in terms of where we see access of healthcare, digitization is a foundation. It's a key foundation, and I think that's where we are in healthcare insurance. But the next layer, in my view, is related to understanding what this digitized data is saying, so that we design services, products that meet this need. If we don't do that, we will be digitizing our processes for the sake of digitizing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mwirigi. That was an excellent parting shot, essentially explaining how customer experience can be scaled up through digital, uptake in Kenya's healthcare sector. Maybe Kamande, do you have any parting shot on the same?
Not really, but I guess in closing, I'd emphasize on the importance, like you said, of an integrated customer experience to healthcare facilities. As the customer becomes more empowered, as the wallet size continues to shrink or be very unpredictable, because that at the end of the day, that's how they'll make their decision on what facility they'll visit. And yeah, everything has to be digital now, including how you serve your customers, how you give them access to information, but most importantly, how you interact with them, not just for their feedback, but also to build that behavioral data that then will put you at a good level as the industry shifts.
Thank you so much, Kamande, for that parting shot. So now we can go straight into the Q&A section. So far, I've only seen one question on the chat, and it's actually about, how you can receive the full report. So we'll give about maybe 1 minute for people to be able to type in their questions. It would be a lot faster if it's typed as opposed to spoken, just to also make it a bit more streamlined. So the question was, how do we receive the report? So I have placed a link there that shows a link where you can, access the report and just read a bit on the background of the report as well. You can also find this link in the email that was sent to you prior to this webinar. That was just a reminder to tell you that the webinar is starting in a few. You can also find it on the same link where you had registered for the webinar. So you should be able to download the report from those links there. The other question that I'm seeing in the chat is, what impact has NHIF had on driving mobile uptake in insurance? Dr. Toruti, maybe you can also give us some insight on this.
Sorry, I missed the question. I have not seen it typed.
Sorry, the question was, what impact has NHIF had on driving mobile uptake in insurance?
Okay, I won't speak on behalf of the NHIF. What I can speak about is from the experience we've had working with the counties, who are the direct partners of NHIF during the UHC pilot counties. So there were 4 counties that there are a number of counties identified to run the UHC pilot, and where we were brought in by the counties was on the part of the digitization of the enrollment. So traditionally, there's a paper-based process that is normally done for NHIF, and what happened was, considering the time constraint and the issue of collecting accurate information on the ground, that process was digitized and interlinked through the county to NHIF. And what happened was, the impact was that you were able to collect data as accurate as possible, and quite quickly it reflects within the registered members for the county in the NHIF system. So from that experience, it also created some awareness about the power of digitization. You could mobilize people on the ground, door to door, with the technology, have intermediate layers where people can do some quality assurance that to ensure that all the data is collected correctly, and this actually has created the awareness that these digital tools that have been used in other industries can have impact on UHC and the public side. On the other side, I know NHIF has digitized a lot. I think the bigger one, which we have seen from this study, where interlinking different data sets, was payments. Payments is a big driver of NHIF activity, and payments through mobile money network has, I think, increased efficiency in collection. So that's from this study, and seeing how the NHIF has transformed, like every other industry, to adapt to mobile money wallets. What I am also seeing on the other side is, now they want to create mobile wallets where people can be able to see their benefits, and I know that's work in progress. So digitization, I think, is a heavy agenda in the government as well as at NHIF. And as you can see from the study, people want NHIF and people want to know more about it. So I think if NHIF is listening, I think they already know this. They are probably finding strategies of how to respond to this. So that's our experience as MTBA.
Thank you, Dr. Toroti. Again, very comprehensive answer on, the different strategies that NHIF is taking to make sure that digital transformation in the healthcare sector is, being well applied in Kenya. And just another question I'm seeing on the group, maybe just before we ask this next question, I'd like to say that we only have enough time for only one more question. So after this, if I don't see another question, we can proceed to close on the webinar. So someone from the audience is asking, this goes to Dr. Toroti, how has understanding your customer helped you drive better products and services as well as growth for Carepay?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So you're asking me to reflect internally, and I will share this. Kamande has mentioned the metric around how to measure customer satisfaction. So I have 3 key customers. I have the hospital where our clients visit.
Sorry, we've lost your audio for a minute. You seem to be on mute.
Sorry, I'll have to skip that. I was saying, so I don't know where I dropped off, but my clients are essentially in health insurances, both the majority of them are in the private side, healthcare providers, and consumers who are customers of the insurance. And what we have been able to do, as Kamandi has mentioned, to use these metrics to measure their perceptions. And again, we come from a society where we were more driven around, we know what the consumer wants, and changing that mindset to listening to the customer has really been a big can I say a mind shift for us, and now using data to immediately identify where the customer pain points and try to rectify that. So in terms of digitizing internally as MTIBA, we try get as much information, whether good, bad, and put it together and try form strategies to ensure that we enhance that experience, because as clearly stated by Kamande, there's a direct correlation between a poor experience and your revenue. So if your customer is not happy, they will go somewhere else. And the beauty about digitization, which is also coming to healthcare, is there are going to be very many players. It's going to be almost, I don't like using the word democratized, but there'll be a lot of players. So you have to satisfy your customer. So there's no magic formula. Listen to your customers, respond to your customers, and ensure that their experience is good. So it can be put in healthcare, it can be put in tech where MTIBA is, it can be put in any industry that you operate in.
We definitely agree with you there. There is no silver bullet, and maybe the best way is just to listen to your customer, as you said. I've just gotten another question. This would be our last question for the day. Again, I think this is going out to you, Dr. Toroti, about, so it says, we have seen a number of private insurers like Britam and AAR signing on to MTIBA to roll out new products. What is driving this?
Thank you. More interesting questions. And I think there was also learning from this survey. So this survey just solidified some assumptions we had, that the insurers are seeing beyond the client base they have. Okay, let me just one step back. Private insurance has primarily been driven by business to business. So they insure companies like Ajua, they insure companies like Carepay, where MTIBA is, and that has been the bread and butter of the industry. And with two things, with them able to collect information about their customers, they are seeing an opportunity of an unserved market. And this report, when you look at it, there's a brief one and the full report. The brief one, the data points showed people want to know about insurance, cost-effective insurances that can provide some cover. So on one side, they're seeing the huge opportunity being brought about by customer feedback. Two, they're seeing efficiencies being gained by using platforms like ours, which connect directly to the consumer and reduce overall costs, allow them now to see if they can define new products that are more cost effective. And then if they are able to go directly to the customer on the further savings they can make and make products that are more cost effective. So we see this as they are seeing a threat, one, because of things like COVID, there is a shrinkage in employment, but they're also seeing the opportunity and technology there. If you ask me, I would say not very confidently, but now with the technology being available, I think they are now seeing they need to develop products that meet the consumer. So back to what does the customer want? And if they're able to meet that, they'll be able to grow revenue. So that's from my point of view, the thinking about why quite a number of insurers are now coming on board, and we are happy to partner with them and walk this journey of increasing access to healthcare, because out-of-pocket expenditure and Harambe's is not a sustainable model.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Dr. Mwirigi, for closing on a very, high note. And one of the things we'd also like to, just extract from this whole conversation that we've had is that it's very clear. It all depends on your customer. Definitely, there has to be a change in organizational mindset to actually understand your customers better and see how you can deliver on your brand promise. And not only that, but to see how to go over and above your customer expectations. And all this is definitely possible, through, mapping out your customer's journey and continuously seeking out to understand how their customer experience is, measuring this regularly, and again, doing analytics to make sure that all this is, you're doing a great job. So I'd just also like to end the call by acknowledging, of course, our partners at Carepay and Levanta for facilitating, the whole report, as well as, putting this webinar together. Thank you so much, Kamande Wambwe, as well as Dr. Toroti Mwirigi, for joining us today on this call to share your insights. We'd also like to acknowledge some of our customers and partners who we've seen on the call, some of whom have joined us from Farm Access, Safaricom, MP Shah, Gertrude's, Karen Hospital, AAR, Liberty, Heritage Insurance, Madison Insurance, ePlus, Optica, and among others. We thank you very much for participating on this call. Thank you so much. So without further ado, enjoy the rest of your week and have a lovely weekend to come. Thank you so much once again. We'll definitely love to see you on our next webinar. Thank you so much, team.
Thank you.
Goodbye.